for a, for a brass bed. And the antique dealer said,
The world loved Paul Newman. His family, however, experienced a very different side of him. Behind the cameras and award-winning performances was a man constantly overwhelmed by fame, emotionally guarded, and often absent from the people who needed him most. His children grew up watching strangers adore their father while they quietly battled feelings of isolation inside their own home. Over the years, the emotional distance between Newman and some of his kids only grew wider, and eventually, one of his daughters reached a heartbreaking point where she no longer felt comfortable calling Paul Newman her father at all, the making of a reluctant star. Back in 1925, in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, Paul Leonard Newman entered the world with the piercing blue eyes that would eventually become one of Hollywood's most recognizable trademarks. But behind those famous eyes was a restless kid who loved trouble far more than rules. Mischief seemed to follow him everywhere, and somehow his natural charm always helped him slip out of the consequences. Long before Hollywood realized what kind of star was coming its way, Newman had already built a reputation for keeping people on their toes. Even though acting caught his attention early in life, fitting in never came easy for him. As a young Jewish boy growing up in that environment, Newman often felt like an outsider. He was even excluded from his high school fraternity, something that stung more deeply than he liked to admit. Friends later recalled that he had a genuinely difficult time during those years, but in many ways, nobody judged Paul Newman more harshly than Paul Newman himself. Years later, when the world saw him as the definition of confidence and charisma, Newman looked back on his younger self with brutal honesty. He once admitted that he never felt naturally gifted at anything. He didn't see himself as a leader, an athlete, a scholar, or even particularly lovable. Beneath the future movie star image was a teenager full of insecurity, constantly trying to figure out where he belonged. His home life only added to that uncertainty. Newman's father, Arthur, owned a sporting goods store and expected his son to eventually take over the business. But Paul dreamed about something far bigger and far less practical. That difference created a cold distance between them. Arthur was a hard-drinking realist who rarely showed affection, and Newman spent years feeling like a disappointment in his father's eyes. His relationship with his mother, Teresa, was just as complicated, only in a completely different way. She came from an old Austro-Hungarian background and carried herself with rigid perfectionism. The house always had to look spotless and respectable, even if emotions inside it were spinning out of control. One moment she treated Paul like royalty, showering him with affection. The next, she could explode in anger without warning. She cared deeply about appearances, creating a household that looked polished from the outside while hiding constant emotional chaos underneath. Somehow, Newman managed to find an escape through performance. At just 7 years old, he stepped onto a stage as a tiny court jester in a production of Robin Hood. By then, he was already involved with the Cleveland Playhouse and performing with its children's theater group. On stage, he discovered something that real life rarely gave him: confidence, purpose, and a sense that he truly belonged somewhere. After graduating from high school in 1943, Newman enrolled at Ohio University and joined the Phi Kappa Tau fraternity. But his college years were quickly interrupted by World War II. Like countless young men of his generation, he felt called to serve and joined the Navy with hopes of becoming a pilot. For years, stories circulated claiming he was grounded because he was colorblind, but Newman later admitted the truth himself. The real issue wasn't his eyesight at all. He simply struggled with the mathematics required for flying. Instead of becoming a pilot, he trained as a radioman gunner. That twist of fate may have saved his life. In 1945, Newman narrowly escaped death without even realizing it at the time. His unit had been assigned to the USS Bunker Hill, an aircraft carrier operating in the Pacific. But before deployment, his pilot developed a severe earache and was unable to fly. Because of that random medical issue, Newman and his crew stayed behind. Only days later, the Bunker Hill was devastated by a kamikaze attack that killed hundreds of sailors. If not for one sudden earache, Paul Newman could have easily died alongside them. Instead, he survived the war and returned home with a second chance at life. After his military service, Newman attended Kenyon College, graduating graduating in 1949 with degrees in drama and economics. He immediately threw himself into acting, traveling with summer stock theater companies like the Belfry Players and the Woodstock Players, determined to sharpen his skills however he could. Later, he spent a year studying at the prestigious Yale School of Drama before moving to New York City to train under legendary acting teacher Lee Strasberg. But before New York, before fame, and before Hollywood ever called his name, another major chapter of his life quietly began at Yale. That chapter was Jackie Whitty. Newman met Whitty while they were both young and chasing artistic dreams of their own. He was a 24-year-old Navy veteran with movie star looks. She was a striking 19-year-old college student, blonde, elegant, shy, and reserved. Friends often noted how different they seemed. Newman loved lively gatherings full of actors and writers, while Jackie was far quieter by nature. Still, the connection between them was undeniable. The couple moved together to Woodstock, Illinois, to join a theater company, and before long, they married on December 27, 1949. Many people later assumed the marriage happened because Jackie was pregnant, but that simply wasn't true. They were deeply in love and believed they were building a future together. At the time, though, Newman's acting career was barely moving forward. Despite his undeniable looks, one theater manager bluntly told him he lacked what it took to become a leading man. Then, Jackie became pregnant, and reality started closing in around them fast. Money was tight, opportunities were scarce, and dreams suddenly seemed less important than survival. Then, life intervened again. After Newman's father died, Paul returned to Cleveland with his pregnant wife to help manage the family's sporting goods business. Their son, Scott, was born there, and for a while, it looked like Newman's acting ambitions had quietly faded away for good. But the dream refused to leave him alone. He would sit in local theaters watching actors take their curtain calls, imagining himself under those lights instead. The longing became impossible to ignore. Eventually, Newman took a massive risk, emptying his savings so he could return to Yale and pursue a master's degree in theater. If acting failed completely, he figured maybe he could at least teach it. So he packed up Jackie and their baby and headed back into uncertainty. The young family rented a cramped top-floor apartment in New Haven while trying to survive on almost nothing. Jackie traveled into New York whenever she could, searching for modeling work. Meanwhile, Newman worked exhausting days as a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman just to keep food on the table. Then came another life-changing decision. Newman dropped out of Yale and gave himself 1 year to make it in New York City. But right before the move, Jackie revealed she was pregnant again. Suddenly, the pressure doubled. He wasn't just gambling with his own future anymore, he was gambling with the future of an entire family. Still, he refused to back down. Slowly, the struggle began paying off. Newman started landing small television roles and earning auditions for stage productions. Little by little, doors finally started opening. One of those opportunities came with the Broadway play Picnic, where Newman played the irresistibly charming drifter Hal while also serving as understudy for lead actor Ralph Meeker. Ironically, Newman initially struggled with the role. One particular romantic dance scene gave him endless trouble because seduction didn't come as naturally to him as audiences would later assume. But Picnic changed his life for a completely different reason. That production introduced him to Joanne Woodward. At first, the chemistry between them wasn't exactly explosive. Woodward thought Newman was handsome, sure, but almost too polished, too perfect. She later joked that he looked like someone straight out of an ice cream soda advertisement. With his neat appearance and polite manners, he came across as conventional rather than exciting. But beneath the surface, something deeper was beginning to grow. The problem was timing. By the time Newman and Woodward developed real feelings for each other, he was still married to Jackie Whitty and raising 2 young children. What followed became one of the most emotionally complicated periods of his life. For 5 long years, Newman carried on a secret relationship with Woodward, while the possibility of divorce hung over everything. The situation weighed heavily on him. Despite his calm public image, Newman privately struggled with guilt and emotional exhaustion. He later admitted he felt terrible at living a double life. But as painful as the experience was for him, Jackie Whitty endured far worse. Living 2 lives at once. By this point, Paul Newman was essentially living 2 completely different lives at once. On one side was Joanne Woodward, the woman he had fallen deeply in love with. On the other was his wife, Jackie Whitty, who was still trying to hold their family together while watching her marriage slowly unravel. The situation became even more complicated when Newman and Jackie welcomed their 3rd child together during the height of his relationship with Woodward. For Jackie, life had transformed into something she likely never imagined for herself. Once an aspiring actress with dreams of her own, she had become a full-time mother, raising 3 children, while her husband's fame exploded around the country. Friends close to the family later described the atmosphere inside the home as painfully tense. Jackie had spent years following Newman from city to city as he chased his career, only to end up isolated at home while he spent more and more nights in Manhattan surrounded by actors, writers, and Hollywood insiders. That world suited Joanne Woodward perfectly. Like Newman, Woodward thrived around creative people and artistic conversation. The two of them shared the same passion for acting, storytelling, and the theater, and their connection became impossible to ignore. Jackie rarely joined Newman during his late-night social gatherings, which only brought him and Woodward closer together. Before long, their friendship had evolved into something far more intimate. Even then, both of them reportedly tried to keep emotional boundaries in place out of respect for Newman's marriage, but the bond between them kept deepening. Woodward later reflected on their early relationship by explaining that they became trusted friends long before they became lovers. They could talk openly with one another without fear of judgment or rejection, and that trust became the foundation of everything that followed. Still, Newman was consumed with guilt over what he was doing. Years later, he openly admitted that the betrayal weighed heavily on his conscience. He knew he was hurting Jackie, and he carried that shame with him constantly. But despite the guilt, he could not bring himself to walk away from Woodward. As Newman's career climbed higher, the situation only intensified. More film projects meant more time in Hollywood, which meant more time with Joanne. At the same time, the emotional strain of living a double life began eating away at him, pushing him deeper into heavy drinking. Friends later described the early years of Newman and Woodward's romance as less of a glamorous love story and more of an emotional ordeal. Newman felt trapped between 2 competing loyalties: his responsibility to his children and his undeniable love for Woodward. Meanwhile, Joanne struggled with the fact that she had become involved in a collapsing marriage. No matter how deeply she loved Newman, she hated the idea of being seen as the woman who tore a family apart. Eventually, the secret became impossible to maintain. Newman finally confessed to friends that he was in love with Woodward, and not long afterward, he admitted the truth to Jackie herself. Those close to the couple later believed the marriage had simply reached a breaking point. Newman and Jackie had married very young, and over time, they had grown into completely different people. In the end, Newman made the painful decision to leave his family and begin a life with Woodward. The emotional fallout hit him hard. Trying to cope with the guilt and chaos surrounding the divorce, Newman began seeing a psychiatrist. Yet even while privately struggling, he and Woodward stopped hiding their relationship in public. Together, they quickly became one of Hollywood's newest and most glamorous couples. But behind the headlines, the damage was devastating. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, Newman knew that Joanne Woodward was pregnant with their first child together. For Jackie Whitty, learning about the pregnancy became the final heartbreak. It forced her to fully accept that her marriage was truly over. The pain never completely faded. Years later, Jackie admitted she still carried deep feelings of betrayal over the way everything unfolded, and the emotional impact stretched far beyond just the 2 adults involved. Newman's daughter, Stephanie, later revealed that the divorce completely shattered her mother emotionally. While Newman wrestled privately with guilt, his career was simultaneously exploding into superstardom. After building his reputation on Broadway, he finally made the leap into Hollywood films. Ironically, his movie debut nearly became a disaster. His first major role in The Silver Chalice was so poorly received that Newman himself later called it one of the worst films of the decade. Critics mocked the film relentlessly, especially its overly dramatic style and Newman's costume-heavy performance. Still, even in failure, audiences noticed him. There was something magnetic about Paul Newman that people simply could not ignore. Critics and moviegoers immediately began comparing him to Marlon Brando, though Newman carried himself with a smoother and more approachable charm. And Hollywood noticed that too. After James Dean's tragic death, Newman landed the starring role in Somebody Up There Likes Me in 1956. Playing boxer Rocky Graziano, Newman delivered a raw and emotionally charged performance that completely changed the direction of his career. Overnight, he transformed from a struggling actor into one of the industry's most exciting rising stars. But his biggest years were still ahead. By 1958, Newman's personal and professional worlds were changing at the same time. He married Joanne Woodward and starred opposite Elizabeth Taylor in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, one of the year's biggest films. The movie became a massive box office success and earned Newman his first Academy Award nomination. From the outside, it looked like he had finally built the perfect life. A beautiful wife, a growing family, and one of the hottest careers in Hollywood. But beneath the surface, tensions were already building. What many people forget is that Joanne Woodward initially became a major star before Newman did. In 1957, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for The Three Faces of Eve, instantly establishing herself as one of Hollywood's brightest talents. At just 27 years old, the industry believed she was destined for greatness. Then, motherhood changed everything. After the birth of their first child in 1959, Woodward gradually began placing family above her career. Leaving her children behind for film shoots filled her with guilt, and little by little, she started stepping away from major opportunities. Meanwhile, Newman's fame continued skyrocketing. That imbalance quietly created resentment. Years later, Woodward reflected on how motherhood altered the course of her career with striking honesty. She admitted that although she adored her children deeply, part of her sometimes wondered what her career might have become if she had chosen differently. She also believed that actors by nature often struggled to be truly present parents. It was a difficult truth that haunted both of them for years. Publicly, Newman carefully maintained the image of Hollywood's devoted husband and charming family man. Fans adored the romance between him and Woodward, treating them as the gold standard of celebrity marriages. But one of Newman's most famous remarks eventually revealed how complicated things really were underneath. When asked how he stayed faithful to Joanne, Newman famously joked about not wanting a hamburger when he already had steak at home. The public loved the line. Joanne Woodward absolutely hated it. While Newman thought he was complimenting his wife, Woodward later admitted the comment made her feel objectified and deeply uncomfortable. To her, it reduced their marriage to something shallow and physical rather than emotional and meaningful. And underneath that glamorous public image, the family carried far deeper emotional wounds. Newman struggled with enormous guilt over the stark difference between the two families he had created. His children from his first marriage grew up far more modestly, while the daughters he shared with Woodward were raised in luxury inside a Beverly Hills mansion. Even though Woodward genuinely tried to bridge the gap between the children, Newman never stopped feeling troubled by the imbalance. Some regrets followed him everywhere. Together, Newman and Woodward built a massive blended family filled with love, chaos, and constant emotional complexity. Raising 6 children under the pressure of Hollywood fame was never easy. But the greatest threat to their family life came from Newman's private battle with alcohol. For years, Newman reportedly drank heavily, sometimes consuming enormous amounts of beer and scotch daily. Friends and family described him as highly functional, someone who could maintain his career and public image while privately spiraling behind closed doors. But the strain on the family was enormous. Woodward later described his alcoholism as one of the greatest sources of pain in their lives. According to one of Newman's daughters, he developed strange routines to force himself through hangovers before filming. One of those rituals reportedly involved plunging his face into a sink filled with ice water just to shock himself awake enough to function on set. But eventually, things became frighteningly serious. One night, Joanne walked into their bedroom and discovered Newman unconscious on the floor after falling out of bed during a drunken blackout. He had badly injured his head, and the scene terrified her. That moment became a breaking point. Woodward gathered their daughters, packed the car, and drove to the family's Malibu beach house. For the first time, she seriously considered leaving him for good. Newman chased after them immediately. When he arrived at the beach house, he reportedly stood outside begging to be let in. This time, Joanne refused. She locked the doors and forced him to stay outside for days, leaving Hollywood's golden leading man sleeping alone in his car. Years later, Woodward described the incident as only one of many painful scenes caused by his drinking. Eventually, the two reconciled and managed to keep much of their turmoil hidden from the public. But while their private struggles remained mostly secret, rumors about Newman's faithfulness began spreading throughout Hollywood. One of the biggest scandals emerged during the filming of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1968. The woman at the center of the rumors was Nancy Bacon, a former cocktail waitress turned writer who had built a reputation as a glamorous Hollywood personality in her own right. Small in stature but impossible to ignore, Bacon became known around around Las Vegas and Hollywood for her striking looks and magnetic personality. Over time, she built a successful writing career while also battling serious personal struggles, including alcoholism and breast cancer. Remarkably, she survived both and created a stable life for herself and her daughter. But according to Bacon, she and Paul Newman also carried on a secret affair while he was married to Joanne Woodward. She later claimed the relationship became one of Hollywood's worst-kept secrets, with friends and colleagues allegedly helping cover for them. According to her account, the affair lasted roughly a year and a half, during which Newman frequently spent nights at her home while telling his family he was working late. Eventually, rumors spread through the tabloids and Hollywood gossip circles. Newman publicly dismissed the stories and attacked reporters covering them, but the speculation refused to disappear. Around town, people even joked that while Newman claimed he did not need hamburgers, he apparently still made time for bacon. In the end, it was Nancy Bacon who reportedly ended the relationship after deciding to move on with her life. But despite the affairs, the fame, the drinking, and the chaos surrounding his marriage, none of it would compare to the heartbreak Newman would eventually face as a father. The death that changed everything. As successful as Paul Newman became, there was one role in his life that he never truly felt comfortable playing: fatherhood. Later in life, Newman openly admitted that he never felt naturally prepared to be a parent. In many ways, he believed he stepped into that role simply because it was what society expected from a husband and father at the time. And when he looked back on the way he raised his children, he was brutally hard on himself. He once confessed to an old teacher that he would not have wanted to grow up as one of his own kids. That regret stayed with him constantly. For all the confidence he displayed on movie screens, Newman privately worried that he never fully connected with his children emotionally. He could command audiences, carry entire films on his shoulders, and disappear effortlessly into complicated characters. But at home, he often felt uncertain, distant, and unequipped. Then came the tragedy that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Scott Newman, his oldest son, looked remarkably like his famous father. But being Paul Newman's son came with enormous pressure. Scott spent years trying to escape the shadow of one of the most admired men in Hollywood. He refused to rely on his father's fame to advance his own acting career because he desperately wanted to succeed on his own terms. But that independence came at a cost. No matter where Scott went, comparisons followed him. People constantly measured him against his father's talent, looks, charisma, and success. Over time, it wore him down emotionally. He struggled with the feeling that the world wanted him to become another Paul Newman, something he believed he could never achieve. Beneath the surface, his confidence slowly eroded, and then, like his father, Scott turned to alcohol. As he struggled to find direction in life, drinking became a growing problem. He also had several run-ins with the law, signaling that things were beginning to spiral. But the real turning point came in 1978, after he suffered a serious motorcycle accident. To manage the intense pain, Scott began heavily using prescription painkillers. The combination proved deadly. In November of that same year, Scott accidentally overdosed after mixing alcohol and drugs. He was only 28 years old. He died on November 20th, 1978, and the loss shattered his father completely. Paul Newman never recovered from the guilt. Years later, he admitted that no amount of time could erase the pain he felt over Scott's death. He tortured himself, wondering whether he could have done more, whether he had missed warning signs, or whether his own flaws as a father had somehow contributed to the tragedy. Friends said the grief followed him everywhere. At times, Newman reportedly fell to his knees asking for his son's forgiveness. Still, even through that overwhelming pain, he tried to channel his heartbreak into something meaningful. In 1980, Newman founded the Scott Newman Center, an organization dedicated to educating young people about the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse. Eventually, the program expanded further, creating support systems for entire families affected by addiction. It became Newman's way of trying to save others from experiencing the kind of devastation that had torn through his own family. Ironically, while his personal life was filled with grief and turmoil, his professional career continued reaching extraordinary heights. Acting, however, was only one part of Newman's identity. Away from Hollywood, he developed a deep passion for auto racing. What began as a hobby in the early 1970s quickly evolved into something far more serious. Unlike many celebrities who dabbled in racing for fun, Newman earned genuine respect in the motorsports world through discipline, skill, and competitiveness, and he was remarkably good at it. Over the years, Newman won 7 Sports Car Club of America national championships and came painfully close to winning Le Mans in 1979. He also captured major Trans Am victories in both 1982 and 1986, proving he was far more than a celebrity driver. Then, incredibly, he added another chapter to his legend. At 70 years old, Newman became the oldest driver ever to win his class at Daytona. Even into his 80s, he continued racing with astonishing determination. In 2007, at the age of 82, he won his final professional race at Lime Rock while driving a 900-horsepower Corvette, a fitting end for a man who never stopped pushing himself. But around that same time, his health quietly began failing. In 2007, Newman was diagnosed with cancer. True to form, he tried to keep the severity of the illness hidden from the public. Reports surfaced that he was undergoing treatment in New York, and not long afterward, he withdrew from directing a production of Mice and Men in Connecticut, citing health concerns. Even then, Newman publicly insisted he was doing well. But those closest to him knew the reality was far more serious. Author and longtime business partner A.E. Hotchner later revealed that Newman had actually been battling cancer for well over a year. Eventually, reports confirmed that the legendary actor had undergone chemotherapy and wanted to spend his remaining time at home with family. When news of his lung cancer diagnosis became public, fans around the world were stunned. Still, Newman handled the battle the same way he handled most of his private struggles, quietly and away from the spotlight. On September 26, 2008, Paul Newman passed away at the age of 83. And with that, Hollywood lost far more than just a movie star. Why Paul Newman's daughter refuses to call him her dad. For most people, fame looks like the ultimate reward. But for Paul Newman, it often felt more like a cage. The Hollywood legend hated the non-stop attention that came with being one of the most recognizable men in the world. And his children ended up feeling that pressure right alongside him. Newman was famously private. He avoided reporters whenever he could and had little patience for signing autographs. What bothered him even more was the way people constantly reduced his success to his striking blue eyes, as if decades of hard work and acting talent meant nothing compared to his appearance. To him, it felt insulting. He wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, not treated like a handsome face on a movie poster. More than anything, he craved ordinary moments. He wanted to walk through public without turning every outing into a spectacle. At one point, he even tried growing a beard, hoping it might help him blend in. It didn't work. People still recognized him instantly. Even children could spot him from a distance. Family trips became exhausting ordeals. Crowds would gather within minutes, and simple outings could spiral into chaos. During one visit to Disneyland with his family, the situation became so overwhelming that they had to be escorted out through a back exit just to avoid the mob of fans closing in around them. As enormous as Newman's fame was, the emotional toll it took on his family may have been even bigger. He had 3 children with his first wife, Jackie Whitty, and 3 more with his second wife, Joanne Woodward. For the kids, living with a father who belonged to the entire world often meant feeling invisible in their own lives. Joanne once reflected on how painful it was watching fans push past the children just to get closer to Paul, treating them as though they barely existed. At home, Joanne became the steady presence in the family. Newman, meanwhile, remained deeply consumed by his work. Preparing for roles often meant isolating himself for long stretches, traveling away from home to research characters, or disappearing emotionally while buried in scripts. His career demanded enormous focus, and family life sometimes ended up taking a back seat. When he finally returned home, things could swing from one extreme to the other. Sometimes he came back overly strict and controlling. Other times, guilt pushed him into spoiling the children in an attempt to make up for his absence. Newman openly admitted that fatherhood did not come naturally to him. He believed part of that came from his own upbringing. He had never felt especially close to his own father, and being naturally reserved, he struggled to offer emotional warmth in ways his children needed. The result was heartbreaking. Several of the children wrestled with serious personal struggles while growing up in the enormous shadow cast by their father's celebrity. Some drifted through life, searching for identity and stability, battling feelings of isolation despite the privilege surrounding them. One of the children later explained that people often assume the life of a celebrity's child must be glamorous, when in reality it can feel deeply lonely and emotionally exhausting. The hardest experience may have belonged to Newman's 3 oldest children, Scott, Stephanie, and Susan, from his marriage to Jackie Whitty. After the divorce, they were constantly moving between households, never quite enjoying the same sense of stability as their younger half-sisters, Clea, Nell, and Melissa, who grew up with both Paul and Joanne under the same roof. Still, despite the differences between the two families, all 6 children shared one reality. No matter where they went or who they tried to become, they were always living beneath the towering shadow of Paul Newman.